Sanguine, right? Like, it's definitely good, but is it top tier? I don't know.
Yeah, anything's top tier if you win with it, right?
True. True. Top tier is just about perception.
The ends don't ever justify the means. No.
Something disagree.
They do for my pushing team, let me tell you. Incarnation and Team Stiefbruders are set to square off. We are going to be starting off with PLAGUEFALL, with Fortified, Bolstering, Quaking, and of course Tormented, our seasonal affix. Let's see what these teams have in store for us as game number 1 gets rolling.
Yeah, it was not even something that we talked about before the run started. Bolstering inside of PLAGUEFALL. We've seen a lot of teams have some issues with the first pull of the dungeon, and I'm interested to see what Incarnation and Stiefbruders put up for their first pull. What do you think that they're about to do here, Dratnos?
All right, so I think Incarnation's probably going to shroud through here, whereas I think Stiefbruders are instead going to get started by actually pulling a lot of this trash. And, oh my goodness, it's happening. Incarnation getting started with their pull. Both teams going on to the Incinerator Arcolith here, and we can see Ashen Hallow, Bloodlust being committed on both sides. Actually not Ashen Hallow, notably. Growl on the side of Incarnation there on Yummy Pala, not using the Ashen Hallow, so they will still have that resource available for a future pull, but it means this pull is so much scarier for them than it is for the Stiefbruders. Oh, look at the bolstering stacks, though, starting to come out, though, on both sides. This is starting to get extremely hairy towards the end of the pull. A lot of crowd control needing to be used. You can see a lot of danger that the players are under here on both sides. They've done it, though. They've been able to kill off all these mobs. Incarnation actually able to get this pull done a little bit more quickly than the Stiefbruders, but notice they got a little bit less count out of that as well. So all things being equal, you know, Incarnation gained a little bit of time, and they still have their Ashen Hallow, but they gave up 4% in the exchange. Hard to tell who got the better of that one.
It looks like they're both pulling the boss at very similar times. And Incarnation and the Stiefbruders are both, you see them, it is a 19 on Fortified, so it's fine that they're pulling Globgrog to this area. We saw this a lot last season. Whenever you had that prideful buff, you were able to burn Globgrog before you got multiple casts of that Slime Wave or just other issues occurring. But since it's a 19 and it is bolstering, you really don't want to clear out the middle of that room from all those slimes, since they are super inefficient on that bolstering affix. And it's so nice to see that both Incarnation and the Stiefbruders have come to like similar conclusions, but that Ashen Hollow absolutely doing work for Incarnation, as you see Yummy Palakir, that Vinthier Holy Paladin, at 11k DPS right now. Dude, I feel like we've had that just every single weekend. It's just like JB's Druid was named JB Nightfey. It was like a Kyrian Druid.
Yeah, you're just trying to trick your team. You log into that and they don't invite you because you got Kyrian in your name and you're a paladin. As Incarnation actually very close to having those orb oozes absorbed by the boss. Look at the side of Stiefbruders as well. Great management of these slimy morsels. The Sigil of Misery there, just keeping them all beautifully stacked up. They are making a great showing here on this first boss. Incarnation now getting started with this next trash pull. This one is another one that can be tricky to manage with bolstering, but you have the priority damage of the Subtlety Rogue and the Frost Mage here, adding a lot of value and making it so that Spinebreaker can actually be one of the first mobs to die in the pack, rather than becoming a 50 bolstering stacks monstrosity.
Well,
it's still pretty large, though.
Yeah, he's very large, but he's super low on his HP. You did see him get bolstered at something like 0.5%, and all of that trash gets dealt for Incarnation really well. That was a great job. Just great preparation, knowing how many globals they need to put into all of that trash. Of course, with some variance, depending on GG procs.
Yeah, there we go. Incarnation now getting started with this next pull.
Oh, no. The Stiefbruders, dude, look at this. They have that Spinebreaker bolstered so high.
And actually, so even though that's only at 10%, that thing now has a lot of raw health, right? In terms of percentage, it's still at 10%, but each time it gets a bolstering stack there, you can see that actually, you know, only costs them about 5 seconds, so really not that bad. Turn of events for the Stiefbruders, who are really, again, they actually have a little bit more count here as well. So even though they're a little bit behind Incarnation in terms of progression through the dungeon, they have earned a little bit more count from the start of the dungeon too. So if that enables them to skip something later, then that could be an opportunity for them to slingshot their way into the lead. Incarnation are not letting up, though. They are getting started with another big pull here. These Slime Claws can be pretty deadly if they're not taken care of very, very efficiently. especially with bolstering as an active affix. They love to run away towards the end of the pull, and if you let them do that, they're going to get a bunch of bolstering stacks, and then they're going to come back in and they're going to kill one of your group members with that that fervent strike ability, their claw. But you can see Incarnation, beautiful. So what they've done actually is they've saved their AoE stuns and stuff for the end of this pull rather than using them on pull.
Yeah.
And that's really, really great way to manage those mobs that like to run away when they're on low health.
Yeah, and so, okay, so I thought that one of them ran away, but they did end up getting that one killed off that was running towards the top of the stairs. And now I'm interested to see what Incarnation's going to do here. A lot of teams have been shrouding through this double Plague Borer set. Ooh, but Incarnation has identified that they need more trash count, and these tentacles give 10 count apiece. They've been commonly skipped from a lot of our teams over the weekends, but at the same time, it hasn't been bolstering yet in this dungeon. So routing is going to be up in the air, because whenever it is bolstering, they're like the devout ads towards the end of the instance, and those slimes that are in the Glogbrog room are a lot less valuable mobs to kill than it would normally be. And so Incarnation has decided to get some of their count from those 2 tentacles, just using those bombers to be able to blow those up. Those Plague Borers do... There is a limited number of Plague Borers that you can get this season from Blightweaver, and I suspect that Incarnation is now going to pull these 2 remaining Plague Borers after Blightweaver dies into a trash pack. And you see Dorky on that Vengeance Demon Hunter running straight to that trash pack on the right and dealing with that. Well, on the side of the Stiefbruders, they're doing the exact same pull that we saw from Incarnation and dealing with that, all of that trash really well, getting that Slime Claw also kidneyed, and they're almost at identical points of trash. Of course, Incarnation is a little bit further ahead, like progressed in terms of where they are in the dungeon, but the Stiefbruders don't have to deal with any of these tentacles, which is really
really
just
nice,
a difference
actually.
I think that I think that is a pretty good thing just as a whole.
The tentacles are a pretty annoying type of mob to fight here, so the Stiefbruders are now going to get this explosion onto their mini-boss. Meanwhile, Incarnation are pulling all the rest of the trash in this boss room. They're not going to go and try and sneak ahead and grab the anima power. We sometimes see teams flirting with the idea of grabbing the next anima power before the boss, or say during a trash pull. But Incarnation not interested in doing something like that. Junkrat actually going to be cheat death used there, as a couple of the slime explosions landed right on top of him. Unfortunate turn of events there for Incarnation, as they're dragging Dr. Ickes back towards where the red slime died, and that means that players can actually stand in that red slime, take a little bit of damage over time, but gaining some haste as a trade-off. And as all DPS players know, just heal me. You know, I'll take this haste buff. Go ahead and heal me.
Just heal me, lol.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Incarnation is running towards Dr. Ickes. A lot of teams have been letting this bomb go off, and I suspect on a 19 fortified, it shouldn't be anything different. I think that they have ample amounts of defensives that they can deploy here to be able to live, whether it be immunities or just touch of karma, lol.
Cryptics.
Ooh, Cryptics in a seed. This is really bad, because now he should come out of the seed and be able to ice block before this bomb goes off, but that was a very unfortunate situation for him.
Yeah, that was the Dr. Ickes' jumps that do the little 4-way explosion. As you can see, everybody now going to fire off their immunes on the side of Incarnation. Big burst of damage coming out, but they are all going to be fine, and now they need to kill Dr. Ickes before this next Plague Bomb explodes. At this Keystone level, with Fortified active instead of Tyrannical, they are going to easily be able to make that DPS check. And let's see what they're up to next. On the side, meanwhile, of the Stiefbruders, Stiefbruders are, it looks like, going more towards that tormented mob before the boss strategy, which I love this strategy. I think this is a really good strategy for people to use on the live servers as well. Get a little bit more anima power before that boss fight. If you're going to kill it anyways, I think it's a really great idea. The reason Incarnation didn't do that is because they have no intention of fighting Executioner Varud. They want that extra challenge with the last boss in exchange for a little bit more time.
And I think that this is like not a bad play for the Stiefbruders. They are at similar count to Incarnation, but they are notably a full boss behind. But if like their way to get back into this game is an Incarnation mistake, and that certainly could happen on Margrave Stradama whenever you have the Oros Coldheart slow, whenever you have that Execution of Ruth 50% heal reduction, and it's quaking on top of all of that.
Oh no!
Oh, but the Stiefbruders tank has gone down. This is really bad. It looks like just the Spinebreaker is left alive. They do have Baruth killed off, so they should be able to kite this out.
Yeah, I think they're going to be able to recover from this, but this was a rough turn of events there for the Stiefbruders. That's going to cost them their one battle res. They will get another res up in the next couple of minutes here, so that will return as a resource for them. But if something were to go wrong on this boss fight, especially in the first minute of this boss fight, they don't have that res available. That could potentially be very costly. They have, though, done a great job of recovering. They now have that extra anima power at their disposal as well as they get started here with Dr. Ickes. Meanwhile, Incarnation doing all of this trash. They aren't doing anything super crazy like pulling trash onto the boss, mostly because that is off limits on this bolstering affix. It's something that you would need to do like at the end of the boss fight rather than the start of this boss fight, and you can't really do that on this boss fight because the ads that it spawns will just aggro all that trash if you don't pull it ahead of time.
All right, and now Dominant Venom Blade has been engaged for Incarnation. They do have that sniper blinded off to the side. I'm interested to see how they're going to deal with it. If they're just going to pull Dominant Venom Blade on top of it after they break out all these Brute Assassins, that would be my expectation. And you do see Dorky here leaping around, grabbing all these Assassins out. And one of those Assassins puddles is like right where that sniper is. Oh, and so they break it. They break the Assassin out, and then they re-para on that sniper. I wonder where they're going to use... I wonder when they're going to kill it, because they're notably... They all are Alliance, but they don't have an ability to be able to drop that sniper. Maybe if that sniper's not tagged with the pack or not in combat with the with Incarnation, it could be they could potentially be able to deal with it that way if it's just not in combat with them. But I hope they're not going to kill it by itself, because that feels like that would just be a pretty big time loss.
Stiefbruders now making their way to that third platform. And that third ooze getting sent into the boss there. Ooh, they have to be a little careful here. So Stiefbruders they're actually going to use Misery and Frost Nova and Ring of Peace to try and keep that slime away. That thing applies a nasty damage taken reduction to anything that gets near it. Beautiful work there, though. You can see Impy with the double Frost Nova, keeping that thing managed for long enough for them to kill the boss. That was actually a really sketchy situation the Stiefbruders were almost in, but they beautifully played their way out of it. And were able to kill that boss without losing basically any time to a situation that was almost very dangerous with that slime getting in there.
All right, and so now that sniper is going to be dealt with after Dominant Venom Blade, and the Stiefbruders dealing with this slime tentacle with some of the defenders and other trash. And they are pretty far behind just in terms of relative time in the dungeon. However, Incarnation does have a lot of potential to wipe here. With that 50% heal reduction, with that Oros Cold Heart slow, with it being quaking on Margrave's Stradama, there is a lot of ways that people can get killed off rather quickly, whether it be get hit by the tentacle, or whether it be just like quaking overlaps and stuff like that. And so now Incarnation has pulled Ichor Bileflesh with a bunch of these Devout ads, and these Devout ads notably do not bolster Ichor Bileflesh, and Ichor Bileflesh will teleport on 66 and 33% enemy forces breakpoints to the next pack, but they need to make sure that they get all of the surrounding trash killed off before they teleport it.
Yeah, these devoted ads do bolster each other, but they won't bolster Ichor Bileflesh, which means that it is safe to kind of do this pull, you know, somewhat reasonably, right? You just go from pack to pack, killing all the trash, and trying to make sure you do it somewhat evenly, but for the most part, it's not too much of a lethal thing there. The main thing that gets you in trouble is if you try and pull all 3 packs at the same time, which can be scary, can be absolutely scary, as now Incarnation will be fighting that last boss soon with those 3 tormented auras. That's what it's all going to come down for. If they can make that happen, they will win this game, but the Stiefbruders have been doing a phenomenal job of keeping this one extremely close. They are well within range, where if Incarnation blink here, if they have a wipe, then that will be Stiefbruders who instead get the opportunity for their much easier version of the last boss without that 50% healing reduction aura.
Yeah, the Stiefbruders here are doing a very dangerous pull. This double defender, double ambusher pack is really, really dangerous. Now they have a bunch of those ambusher mobs to deal with. But on the left side, Incarnation has pushed Margrave Stradama into her first phase. They do still have Bloodlust and Ashen Hollow available, so they have ample amounts of damage to be able to deal with a bunch of these phases. And if you look at their raid frames, you'll see that now whenever they tag this Devout ad that walked into them, now they are slowed. And they have they're affected by those affixes. But once the Devout ad dies...
Dorky!
That
He got smashed by one of the tendies, but he's fine. Yeah, he's in his meta here, and they're now going to send that Time Warp.
Did he cheat?
I don't know if he cheated. I don't think he did, but he did use his meta, I think that was
Okay.
just pressing meta that happened, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are 3 debuffs, but I think that the cheat is probably the highest priority. And Margaret Shadama immediately gets blasted whenever that Bloodlust has been popped by Incarnation. And here is the last dangerous part of the instance, is just this intermission. And because, look at it, everybody's so slow, Junkrat has to pop his Cloak of Shadows and even steps through those Devout ads. And it looks like everybody is slowed by the Margrave Stradama Devout
Yeah.
mobs. And this is okay. So Incarnation is in a good spot here, and Growl even preemptively drops his Ashen Hollow to make sure that everybody's going to be able to get topped up, because they're only going to get 1 Infectious Rain.
Yeah, they're in great shape now. They've handled all of the hardest parts of this fight. The boss is now melting from here, and Incarnation, in dominating fashion here, are going to take game 1 against Team Stiefbruders, who are actually really, really doing a good job of holding this one close, as they had a very good run on their own end.
That's right, Incarnation taking that victory, sub 15 minutes here in PLAGUEFALL. And like we mentioned before, we want to be looking at these teams like Stiefbruders, like others, who are trying to make sure they're keeping it close, even though there is a wide difference in some of the seeding there. So well played by both of the teams. And of course, big congratulations to Incarnation for taking game number 1 here, Zyro.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that, because in past MDIs, it's been kind of a trend where the lower seeded teams on the first day will just try to play up to the level of the team they're playing against, and they'll kind of fail in spectacular fashion. But today has been probably the most competitive day 1 we've seen in the MDI in a long time. All of these lower seeded teams are playing at their own pace, which might seem slow to somebody not watching the normal MDI, but they're still going on 3 chess pace, and they're putting themselves all in a position where if the top higher seeded team makes a mistake, they could catch up and win. So it's nice to see that. Like, Stiefbruders was like neck and neck with Incarnation up until the second boss, and then they just went for a safer strat by pulling the second damage Tormentor instead of just going straight into the boss like Incarnation did. But, you know, they're still playing pretty well, and again, obviously an impressive run from Incarnation too.
Yeah. And that's what we want to be looking for in particular for Incarnation. And let's also talk specifically, what were the big areas that Incarnation just blew past Stiefbruders here?
Yeah, again, similar to what we were talking about the Mega Pump, it's important to compare their runs to what we saw from previous weeks' high-end teams in this dungeon as well, and opting to go for similar strategies, even with a more difficult affix than we saw in the week 1 PLAGUEFALL, which was also 19 fortified. Going for that first big pull, but opting to save the Ashen Hollow, which is key, getting through that Incinerator pull without using Ashen Hollow, so that they can then use it on the first boss and burst that down, so they can have their DPS CDs up for the big bolstering trash pulls. Just important optimizations. And trying to compare the times from this 19 bolstering fortified to the 19 fortified PLAGUEFALL we had in week 1 is difficult. We saw like 12:30 runs back then. I think this is actually pretty much a top tier time, surprisingly enough, even though it's 2 minutes slower, because bolstering is just kind of that slow of an affix, right? Yeah. You can't pull trash with bosses because you'll bolster the boss, and on top of that, you have to be a lot more careful about where you place your damage on trash pulls as well, because you don't want to over bolster any big mobs. So I think that was, all in all, like a pretty efficient run, and I think we're going to be hard-pressed to see any runs that go any crazily faster than that.
I think it's really cool, too, that the Stiefbruders were in position to be able to take that if there was any mistake on Incarnation. They ended up playing like 1 additional Tormented mob. They played the Executioner of Varuth, and they were actually keeping up really early on, their Globgrog. You could argue like they were even potentially even ahead coming out of Globgrog because they had a little bit more count, and it was within a few seconds. They ended up losing it in the middle half of the dungeon, but they were in position to strike if Incarnation made 1 single mistake, which it's... What are they, the 17th seed? They're the 17th seed coming into it, and Incarnation is the 8th seed, and it comes down to how much practice they've put in, and a slower route sometimes you can capitalize on it. We saw it in Cup A. There was a lot of mistakes from some of the teams in Cup A, and the slower teams would just come back and capitalize whenever there were those just minor blunders. And I thought that the Stiefbruders were playing to their win condition ultimately.
Yeah, and that's what we have to be looking for in particular. I mean, we already saw earlier today where Echo had their sort of near wipe that they were trying to stitch back together, and they burned a lot of time as a result of that, right? You want to be able to capitalize on any sort of mistakes because it can really happen to anybody as we're looking at it. So with that victory, it's also going to mean that we're going on to Theater of Pain, Dratnos, and there's quite a bit of pain on this one with Tyrannical, Spiteful, and Necrotic.
Yeah, this is a nasty combination of affixes, especially in this dungeon as well. These boss fights are going to be grueling encounters, and the trash sections, even though Fortified isn't active, Necrotic plus Spiteful is actually, it means that they are going to be pretty rough, especially towards the end of the pull. If your tank is trying to play around Necrotic, and you start having Spitefuls just spawning all over the place, you could easily get boxed into a rough spot. So definitely a dungeon that is going to be a pretty different texture than Plaguefall, but I'm excited to see what both these teams have for us in this one.
Yeah, I'm most excited as well to look at the discipline continue from the Incarnation squad right now, Tettles, because we talked about it before, of bolstering management and everything like that, and Plaguefall going really well for them. We're not having any sort of crazy, nasty bolsters or anything like that. But when you have to go through the Kultarok wing in theater, you also have to watch for these Spitefuls so that you can quickly drop combat for that little half second, a little fraction of a second, so that you can continue taking the different portals in that wing. And so far, they've been really efficient, so I'm excited to see what theater's going to have too.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to Yoda yesterday, and he was saying, he was messaging me, "Are you going to be casting our game tomorrow?" I'm like, I don't know. Why? Which one are you? He's like, oh, I was just curious because I'm going to be playing Hunter, and I can't wait for you to say bad things about Hunter when I die. So I said, oh, even better. I'm analyzing that game so I can go in depth as to why you died.
I think that the first boss is going to be very dangerous for both teams since it is Necrotic. We have like this like the meta strategy for the first pull in Necrotic or in Theater of Pain is to pull all of the trash on top of the first boss whenever it's not like bolstering. And I'm wondering if the teams are going to adapt and not pull all of the trash on top of that boss, because you can get too many stacks of Necrotic. And with Destia, she already can kill your tank just outright without your tank having 30 stacks of Necrotic. Also, I do wonder if we're going to see the Prot Warrior because of that. Because Prot Warrior, we've seen it a lot in these dungeons. I don't know if I've ever seen Dorky play a Prot Warrior. I'm sure he can absolutely pick it up if given time. But like a Dwarf Prot Warrior inside of Theater of Pain would almost certainly be the most ideal tank for this setup, I think.
Can't they also play Kyrian Dratnos? Forgive me, didn't we see the Kyrian Spear as well coming out, so they'd have additional Necrotic removal there?
Yeah, the Kyrian Spear has a lot of good utility in this dungeon just without affixes even considered, when you think about all the mobs that love to jump around and get out of the AoE. So Spear kind of gripping them back in is a huge piece of utility. And yeah, the extra Kyrian Necrotic removal with the File of Serenity definitely would be pretty valuable. So I think I agree with Tettles. Dwarf, Protection Warrior, Kyrian would, I think, be the ideal tank
with the Holy
in
Paladin.
Theory. Yeah,
with the Holy Paladin for the buff, of course.
Of course.
And you run with Kyrian Hunter, but then
With
you
the
spec
vial,
into with
yeah.
the vial technology. You
That
go
means
with
they're
the
playing
Playa.
Playa, though.
Yeah, see, you
they
get
are
Ascended
not happy.
Vial. You
No,
get
the Hunter
Hope
needs his
Springs
file
Eternal.
for himself, guys.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it copies the vial's effect. Okay, so you go Ascendant Vial and Hope Springs Eternal. They're both Soulbind traits on the right side of Klea's tree, and so whenever you pop the vial, it also pops the vial for the lowest health target, right?
He doesn't
And then
know.
so it removes the bleeds, gives 8 seconds of necrotic immunity, and then it also makes them have 20% damage reduction. So.
Can Kyrian
pretty
Hunter
nuts.
afford to lose Mechanicos? I feel like
They
the
can't,
answer is
no.
Wait,
no.
they don't run
No.
Mechanicos, right?
You need that so much. It is
I think you
it
need
reduces
it.
your resonating arrow from 60 seconds to 40. That is so big. You just
Do they run it? Am I
yeah,
crazy?
firing off.
Yeah.
Well, I think they
Alright.
run Pelagos sometimes for single target situations. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what we've been seeing, but
Okay.
they don't run Klaya unless
They
absolutely.
don't run. I know
forced
they
to
don't
by
run
their
Klaya.
tank.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess it was like maybe it's a live server difference or something. Because I
Yeah.
thought my hunter always runs Pelagos on live servers, and he said he like hated
So
Mechanicos.
Kyrian Arcane
Yeah.
Mage.
Okay, hear me out as well. Horde versus Alliance is actually an interesting discussion in this dungeon
You're right.
too, right? Because we're talking about all these things you get out of Dwarf, and with Necrotic active, there are those extra benefits from that. But if you're playing Horde, you get Arcane Torrent, and there are quite a few spots in this dungeon where that makes some pulls work out a lot more cleanly. So I'm curious to see what teams go for. I would suspect they mostly go Alliance this week because of the power of the Necrotic reset on the tank, but I don't
Yeah.
think it's a sure thing.
I mean, there's only really one pull, I would say, from the Bone Megases that you can peel their shields off or something like that, which, yeah, it can save a lot of time, but it can be pretty brutal with the Necrotic and all the extra things that you have to worry about when it comes into play. So I would expect it, but I'd see your point in that there has been a number of areas where people have been able to switch around between the different racials to their benefit. So just waiting for these teams, of course, to get ready. Incarnation's been up 1 against Team Stiefbruders, so we've been looking at some of the different challenges these Avixes have, because they can't just immediately steal a strategy from Group A or Group B or anything like that, Zyro, because we're constantly shifting Keystone level, affixes, Tyrannical, Fortified, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this like a little bit. It's kind of because it is one of the new things for our season this time around. The different key levels plus the different affixes from week to week. You can kind of get a baseline. You can be like, okay, so this is where they're getting their count this week. What are our affixes? What do we need to change for that? But you really have to optimize it. There's a lot of optimization that can be done from week to week, and that's why we're seeing the best teams consistently at the top of the bracket still versus our lower seeded teams.
That's right here, and we got our game ready to roll here. Incarnation feeling good after that victory in PLAGUEFALL. They did a great job of being very disciplined when it came to bolstering management. Their execution was spot on. Now we'll be looking to see if that continues, as Theater of Pain is going to be testing their skills not only with necrotic management, but also you just saw that Koltharok wing where they have to make sure they're killing off the Spiteful quickly or avoiding him entirely to get through the portals in his wing. So let's see what these teams have in store as Incarnation and Team Stiefbruders square off in the Theater of Pain.
Bro, I just leaked. I just got leaked the comp by looking at Twitter on accident from what Dorky is playing, but you're going to be very surprised, Stratness. I will say that.
All right, I cannot wait to see this. I am...
Don't say.
All right, hang on.
I don't know why he's playing that either.
No spoilers. Let's see what it is once we get into the game. This is what I should I open Twitter and check as well?
No.
I'm gonna be disciplined. I'm gonna wait until it shows up on screen.
For these guys, I mean, this is what we want to be looking for, is the constant adaptation, the constant, innovation for these teams, finding creative solutions and also stepping out of their comfort zones too, because, too often, Zyro, people keep mentioning how, okay, this team or that team, this guy's just the mage player. It's just Dr. J, he just plays mage. This is Shelley, he just plays warlock, something like that. But, when it comes to multi-classing and multi-spec, and these MDI teams continue to impress.
Yeah, I mean, that's been just a trend for the longest time. For the first couple of seasons, you could have your one tricks, you can get away with it. But as people started to optimize for their routing and for the actual, bottom classes at the time, people realized very quickly that you really can't one trick and be competitive in the MDI. I mean, even Dr. J had to play rogue for a couple of seasons. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the multi-classing is a big deal.
And I think especially when you're looking at, how some of the tank comps or some of the DPS comps can shift around and everything like that. We've seen no shortage of priest players for MDI, whether it's been like Ryzen or Mode, who are switching into Paladin and making sure they have the mastery there. And it's also interesting to look at the different layers of the Covenant swaps as well, Titles, because then that starts adding extra little shifts and adjustments to your gameplay.
Yeah, and it's so just interesting because there are multiple options, and even in things like, I think Spires of Ascension is probably the one that's the most heavily influenced by that, because you can get double Kyrian Spear at a different point of the dungeon. But even something like Theater of Pain, a lot of Windwalker monks really do want to, you want to be either Necrolord or Kyrian for whenever you're playing Windwalker, and going into Theater of Pain just makes the decision really pretty easy.
Why are they
playing Arms Warrior?
Broad Warrior!
Let's go!
No, that's
Arms Warrior. Arms Warrior, there we go, sorry.
My mind.
Oh!
Dorky is playing the Kyrian Protection Paladin. Now, Kyrian Prot Paladin, actually, Dwarf Kyrian Prot Paladin has even more necrotic options than everybody else, right? You've got Bubble, you've got Buff, you've got Stone Form, you've got Phial of Serenity, and that's just yourself. And then you have your Holy Paladin, who's available with their Bop as well. So you really can just ignore the necrotic affix for the most part, and you always have a button available to just deal with it. look at the damage as well that Dorky is putting out here on this pull. You know, a lot less than all the other players, but still a solid 17k so far on this big trash pull into the boss. So not bad either, kind of holding his ground relative to the prop warrior we see coming out from Team Stiefbruders, the more standard option, I would say, in this dungeon.
Dude, somebody call Undad TV, because Cryptic's on this Arms Warrior. I swear I hear more propaganda about Arms Warrior than
Arms
anything
is so
else.
sick in this dungeon. It's actually so
Explain.
good here. So Arms has a tremendous amount of 2-target damage with sweeping strikes, and this boss fight, 2 targets fantastic. Zav, you know, you get to cleave down that banner for free. So you have some great boss fights for dealing huge amounts of good damage to important targets. And just the entire dungeon is these pulls of like 3 or 4 targets that Arms is just really, really happy to operate in those sized pulls. And it's also it's just delighted for the single target moments in this dungeon too, which there are quite a lot of. So a great choice. I'm excited to see this, especially with the Kyrian Covenant too. You've just got damage for every single pull on that spec.
Dude, Incarnation made quick work of that first boss, even though it is on that 20 Tyrannical, especially compared to where Team Stiefbruders are. They pulled a very similar amount. They pulled all the exact same mobs. Stiefbruders, of course, did have 1 death near the beginning, but with the battle res, now Stiefbruders running that rogue. I wonder if they're going to be able to take advantage of the utility that rogue has to offer over the Incarnation. I would call it, this is the ultimate iteration of the Melee Boys comp, with the even with this warrior. Like,
yeah,
not even the tank warrior, it's the DPS warrior.
So there's that Kyrian Spear of Bastion coming out from Cryptics. Look at the damage as well. Almost doing half of a Windwalker of damage on this pull. That is a huge amount of damage to be putting out as one class.
Dreadnought is mad.
Yeah, Windwalker.
You can tell that there's some pent-up resentment from Dreadnought playing Arms a little bit on this patch, and now Incarnation just is going to run through. Ooh, Junkrat accidentally getting clipped by one of those green swirlies. They're running all the way through, and they have to deal with one of these Portal Guardians. And then Incinerator Arcoleth is also here, and we've seen a lot of teams pull all of this together with this Shackled Soul. They committed a lot of CDs to that Executioner Baruth pull, and I wonder if they're going to have their buttons back up. But it looks like Cryptics on that
Yes,
Arms
he does.
has his buttons back available once more, and Junkrat on that Windwalker monk doesn't need buttons. He just press the spinning crane kick.
Yeah, Cryptics is playing that Forge Light Mikanikos tree that it gives you the spear 40 seconds or 20-second cooldown reduction every time you press it, and you hit at least 5 targets. So crazy frequent ability that you can use there. Yoda, meanwhile, Jack actually ended up being correct that it was not going to be that tree that we saw as the Kyrian Hunter for Yoda. He's not playing Klaya, though. He's playing Pelagos instead, which is indeed kind of a standard Hunter option. Although we do see the Forge Light tree sometimes in MDI.
I got pinged that all other hunters were trolling that Yoda was right, according to Yoda, of course.
Yeah,
and now
Impy
the
actually
Stiefbruders-
also playing Pelagos for the Stiefbruders on the Hunter as well, also playing Kyrian Marksmanship.
Dude, the Stiefbruders are putting up an incredible fight right here. That pull that they've just pulled off with this Portal Guardian, they're getting Incinerator Arcoleth super low, they're kiting out these Spiteful Shades, and they're doing the exact same pull that Incarnation is doing, and they do have that Subtlety Rogue. That's going to help them, I feel like, a lot down the stretch. Once you start to get more towards the bosses or towards some of those pulls that require a little bit more priority damage as opposed to just the AoE, I do feel like the Stiefbruders comp is going to be better at different things, and you even see that in the deviation of which route they went. Incarnation went towards that double mage platform, and they dealt with that double mage platform, whereas the Stiefbruders are going towards the more AoE-focused Shackled Soul, Soulbinder platform that they drop an Ashen Hollow on and just use the priority damage from that rogue to be able to kill off that Soulbinder.
Yeah, this is a platform you really don't want to adventure to unless you have that Subtlety Rogue, I would say. They are really good at that platform, but Incarnation lacking that access to that, and instead had to go the other way, losing a little bit of count for doing so, but not an insurmountable amount of count either. As you can see, they're now getting started on this Bone Reaver pull with the 4 Magi coming in as well. Those need to be very carefully managed, as those Bone Spear casts will be pretty lethal. Cryptic's going to fire off the Spear of Bastion here, but that doesn't actually help stop the casts from these mobs unless it's combined with something like a Ring of Peace, which actually they're going to use those at separate times rather than using them as a wombo combo.
Did you see what they used? They used Avenger Shield to interrupt most
Yeah,
of them,
so-
and then they used just like blinding light out of that.
Avenger Shield's
like
so good for this, especially
Yeah.
when you're playing Kyrian, you have Divine Toll, right? And Divine Toll is the Kyrian Paladin ability. When you're playing Prot Pally, it sends out an Avenger Shield at everything basically, and so you will interrupt all of the 5 targets that it is primarily targeting, and then it's also going to bounce around and deal extra damage to everything as well. And it provides you a huge amount of self-shield from that too, so you can see on the healing meter, Dorky pretty much self-reliant on that pull, even with the Necrotic Affix.
Yeah, I do feel like the Prot Paladin is really good in here. Normally the qualms with Prot Paladin is the survivability is kind of lacking, but we even saw a lot of Protection Paladins in the Race to World First. They were playing Vinthier and like brought a lot more to be offensive focused, but I do that Kyrian Protection Paladin does still put up some serious numbers in regards to damage.
Yeah, this means I think that both healers and tanks, we are now 1 spec away from having seen all 6 of them in our MDI as well. I think we're missing Holy Priest and Blood Death Knight, if I'm not mistaken, and then we will have our bingo cards all filled out for this season, which is pretty hype. I'm hoping we get to see 1 or both of those specs because they are pretty cool, but even getting 5 out of 6 is an incredible amount of diversity in our metagame here.
And Dorky asked one of the admins whether or not he was the first Prot Paladin this season so far. That was what the tweet was. He goes, "Am I the first?" And the admin's like, "Yeah."
Yeah,
Dorky's like,
indeed he is.
all right. And so now Incarnation grabbing these Shackled Souls almost immediately into the boss, and Cryptic's standing inside of that Spear of Bastion.
Yeah, look how many
even while
targets we
getting
got
sucked.
here. We got 2 targets. You're not allowed to run away from the boss if you got 2 targets as an arms warrior. You gotta just hit the sweeping strikes and do the damage. That's unfortunately not working out for Cryptic as he is getting beaten by the tank and the healer, but he does eventually eclipse the tank here. Dorky, though, fighting for that spot here. Dorky is doing 10,000 DPS on a mostly single target pull. Excuse me? Is Protection Paladin overpowered? How is this doing this much damage?
Protection Paladin OP? Dorky
Is this
hack?
the new hack?
Has he cracked
Yeah.
the code?
I think he might have.
Stiefbruders.
He's actually playing a very offensive build as well. He's playing Seraphim, which is a talent that basically sacrifices some, a defensive resource, right? You use your holy power rather than on like healing you or protecting you. You use it to instead give you a boatload of secondary stats and deal more dam.
Yeah, but the Stiefbruders are keeping up with Incarnation, pulling the boss just a few moments later. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that they actually have a decent chance to have like a lot more boss damage because of that funnel from that subtlety road. If they are really utilizing that Shuriken Storm Eviscerate combo where you're able to get off a lot of their damage. And they even have the Ashen Hollow up on the side of the Stiefbruders right now. So now their Holy Paladin is going to continue to accelerate their Kultha Rock kill time by that much more. But Incarnation is still just a little bit in the lead, mostly off the back of the first boss taking 30 seconds shorter, it feels like. I think that we need to look down at the bottom whenever Kultha Rock does go down for the Stiefbruders and see that split differential and see, because I suspect that it's probably going to be very close.
I agree. I think there's a good chance the Stiefbruders have either gained time here or they're going to be right around the same as Incarnation. Although, as their Ashen Hallow expires, all of a sudden the damage does slow down a little bit for the Stiefbruders, but they've got a new Resonating Arrow as Impy just tunneling that damage into the boss here. Keeping up with the Subtlety Rogue on a single target with some funnel is a very impressive feat there. Meanwhile, Incarnation are getting started with a massive pull. Dorky fires off that Divine Toll, starting to make threat. Dorky will also be casting some free judgments for a while. He is playing that Kyrian Legendary. After casting Divine Toll, you instantly cast Judgment every 5 seconds for the next 15 seconds. That is a legendary power that has been nerfed like 5 times since it was initially created on PTR, and is still a strong effect for any Paladin playing Kyrian.
Yeah, and now they're just kiting out these Spiteful Shades. You do see Cryptics here trying to beat them up, and it looks like, okay, so Incarnation is now group running down this walkway. I suspect that they're going to pull that gas bag, like sludge spewer, massive pull that we've seen so many teams have problems with. But since it is a tyrannical setting, it is on a 20, they do still have problems, and they could potentially wipe, but they have a lot of dispels if the sludge spewer cast goes off. Plus, it's not one of those like inspiring affixes. So assuming that Dorky can live on with utilizing probably 6 outs for Necrotic, then this should be fine. And now Incarnation, they're invis potioning all of this. So whenever you invis potion this, you activate the RP from the sludge spewers, but they don't aggro you. And if you're using like a worse, I would say, invis, like rogue stealth or camo or like druid prowl, then you do end up pulling them. But Incarnation pulling 3 mobs into Gore Chop, which is some of their best amount of cleave, comes on that 3 target situation.
Yeah, Stiefbruders, you may have missed as well, did a pretty cool thing with their pull upstairs.
Ooh, what did they do?
They actually shrouded into the middle of the first pull in the Gore Chop wing, and then they were able to land their Spear of Bastion onto all of the first leaps right at the start of the pull. So they actually made that pull die extremely quickly as a result.
Look at this, they're going to snap. The
Yeah, they are.
Stiefbruders,
Impy is on a
they're
mission.
sending their Hunter. Yeah, they're sending their Hunter ahead, and he even pops his invisibility potion like I was talking about, because camouflage is not good enough to be able to deal with this. And so this is a crucial moment for them. Getting their whole entire group snapped into the Gore Chop area is going to be absolutely... it has to happen. We saw, oh gosh, it was evolving in Cuphead, and they were able to pull this off. They were doing something very similar, where their Hunter is going to MD his pet, and then they're going to send Gore Chop to the pet, and then once the pet dies, then he's going to turtle the whole entire pack and tank Gore Chop until the first grip happens. And the Stiefbruders are pulling it off right here, Dratnos.
Yeah, this is fantastic work here from Impy. A lot of really tough management there, but as soon as the friends join the party, they have that bop available, and incredibly well done there by Impy. We had actually a great angle on seeing all of the actions he was taking. That is an extremely technical thing to do. The management of moving your pet around, making sure that you're using just all of these buttons in exactly the right order. Very well done by Stiefbruders, and a bold strategy as well. I mean, that is a strategy that we have seen go wrong for some of the best teams in the MDI. And so Stiefbruders choosing to try and make it happen and then succeeding in this fashion is extremely good news for them, and means that, you know, even if they end up going down to Incarnation here, they are going to be a force to contend with in the lower bracket.
Yeah, Incarnation playing that turbo cleave comp of PvE, just running straight at the mobs and making them pay for being in their way. And now Incarnation just has the Zav Wing, which I feel like the Zav Wing is probably the Incarnation's strongest suit. Would you agree? Just the lack of AoE and like 5 target mob pulls, the real 5 target melee specialist kind of area is this Zav Wing.
Yeah, this is actually going to be a phenomenal opportunity for Incarnation to just deal so much damage to all of these targets. They are really good on that 5 target number, because so many of their abilities, right? Spinning Crane Kick, Divine Toll, you know, notably these abilities really fall off after 5 targets, but they deal so much damage to exactly 5. And even Cryptics, you know, when he's got his sweeping strikes going, he actually deals quite a bit of AoE, especially in that Spear Bastion. But look at this. I mean, look at this pull right now for Arms Warrior. 2 targets that are both mini bosses that both need to take a ton of damage. This is the exact situation that when you are in the character selection screen and creating your Arms Warrior, this is what you're envisioning is going to happen to you, is you're going to get these 2 target pulls.
Yeah, there's even a Spiteful for him to get some bonus damage on if he still has a Sweeping Strikes up. Don't mind if I do take that. It looks like Incarnation is setting up a pull with this champion. They may have been getting CC out on it. It looks like they're just kind of... They're walking towards it, but it looks like they're hesitating. Oh, okay, so they were waiting for a very specific moment where they got the other mini-boss activated, and now they have pulled all of the Arbalists and other trash into the corner, and they have 2 mini-bosses, all of the Conscripts and the Arbalists trapped inside, trapped with Cryptics. You're here with me, I'm not here with you, being shouted by Team Incarnation as they are dealing with both of these, both of these mini-bosses at the same time. And he gets a reset on his Necrotic. That's really good for him.
Yeah, Dorky's actually not playing Bop as well. He's playing Spell Warding instead, so he has 1 fewer Necrotic reset than you would normally have access to. But that Spell Warding was something that they got quite a bit of value out of in some of the heavy magic damage, especially on like the Kultharok wing. And maybe they'll even get some towards the end of this dungeon on the last boss too. We'll have to see. Whew, they still have so many options though with the Stone Form and the Bop from Growl as well, from Yummy Pala.
Yeah, and now Yoda there turtling that bleed that was being thrown on him. And now Incarnation at 98% enemy forces just has that trapped champion left to deal with. That Yoda's probably going to pre-place the trap here in the corridor to make sure that thing gets CC'd whenever it walks in. So nothing too bad happening for them. And now Incarnation has engaged Zav the Unfallen. They only have 2 bosses and 1 mob remaining before they are over with the dungeon. And on the side of the Stiefbruders, they are doing something similar to where we saw Incarnation do, where they pulled a bunch of their trash, except they're being a lot more conservative with their pack. They're not running, they're not pulling double champion. They're only pulling 1 champion. But with the Arbalists and the Conscripts, this is still a really scary pull, and not one that you should do at home.
Yeah, Stiefbruders are making it look easy, though, as they are now running towards the next RP bit here. They've spawned their mini-boss. And once they fight this, they'll be on the same boss as Incarnation as well. So Incarnation definitely do not have a wipe to give here. If something were to go wrong, they would be in massive, massive trouble against the Stiefbruders here as they finish their duel. Cryptix looks like returning victorious, getting to do some delightful cleave now onto both of these 2 targets. Cryptix is just, this is one of those fights as an Arms Warrior that's just so fun. The whole time
Yeah, he earned it.
You're getting to cleave, yeah.
Look at this yummy Palakir topping the damage meter currently with that Ashen Hollow. Truly an unholy amount of damage. But now Cryptix zooming ahead with that Blade Storm on top of that banner. And Zav is so low right now. It is tyrannical, and he's absolutely getting melted. Are they going to kill him before the second duel even goes off? Oh my goodness.
Yes, that is just so much damage out of Incarnation. Their composition is just so optimized for exactly that boss fight and the boss fights of this dungeon that they were able to just make such short work of it. They've killed it here before Stiefbruders have even pulled it. Stiefbruders, though, are now pulling the boss, and they are certainly still in range here if Incarnation were to have something go horribly wrong on the last boss. But the good news for Incarnation is that the most likely way for this dungeon to have gone wrong up until now was probably Sagadon pulling during that last boss fight, and that didn't happen. So they are now just this last boss, and then they are home free. Meanwhile, Stiefbruders still have to make sure they're watching out and not pulling Sagadon in the middle of this boss fight.
You know what's funny? Incarnation sent Junkrat to activate the Mordretha RP here right before they ended up pulling the boss instead of sending their healer, and now Incarnation has engaged Mordretha. On the side of the Stiefbruders, they are hoping for an Incarnation wipe. But Incarnation does have 2 of those Tormentor buffs activated. They elected to kill... there's a death on the side of the Stiefbruders, and they pulled Sagadon.
It's not just death, there's Sagadon. Yeah, Sagadon has been engaged. I think they might have dropped combat with it, though. I think they might only have had their player downstairs getting in combat with Sagadon. Oh, wait, no, I can see it running at them. So I think Stiefbruders are gonna experience exactly that thing I was talking about here, where Sagadon ends up pulling in the middle of this boss fight, and there's just very little that can be done about that. He will soon join the party upstairs here, and the extra physical damage taken on this fight is already catastrophic. There it is, the big tin can man shows up, and everybody is going to go down for the Stiefbruders. You can see, though, Impy, big smile on his face, just head and hands, man. The Sagadon getting pulled in the middle of the boss fight. That is rough. That is such a rough thing when that happens. They're in great spirits about it.
Dude, they were honestly having a miraculous series. That Plaguefall was also just a great run by them. I don't think that they have anything to be upset about. And I think that they will
not at all.
They will have an absolutely tear through the lower bracket. I think their consistency with how they have been playing in this first series was really good, but not to downplay Incarnation, as with this very unique comp, Mordretha drops increasingly lower. And like what I was talking about earlier, they did play Executioner Varuth, but I wonder if they could have gotten away without playing Varuth at all and played 3 tormented buffs on the last boss, because I feel like that's the only way that you could even optimize this dungeon further if you're Incarnation. Their composition has looked lights out. The amount of damage that they're bringing on these bosses. You see Cryptix almost at 12k DPS.
Let me let you in on a little bit of a secret here. Some of that damage from Cryptix is actually taunt spell reflect on the Reaping Scythe as well.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We love to see we'd love to see all the new tech, you know? It's very ethical, right? They get the best of both worlds. They get miles and miles and miles of necrotic removal with that Prot Paladin. They don't have to worry about switching to lower DPS